Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming online and here in person. We are very happy to have Professor Rada Iveković to be here today. She has been a long-time friend of ours, starting from 2005. We had a conference at Yilan. Yeah, that's the first time we started our collaboration, or it's like a biannual summer school or summer universities held by different universities and professors brought their graduate students to different places. One time in Hsinchu, 2009, yeah, right, we had this conference on biopolitics, ethics and subjectivation, reconsidering modernity in East Asia. But before that, we also went to Xia, France. The theme was culture and politics, 2007. And then we went to different places. Sometimes Rada was with us, sometimes not, but we went to Albania, Porto, she was there too, and Toulouse, France, one time. And the theme were like culture and politics and decentering, and then we invited Rada to come here and visit and gave a lecture series, a short course on migration, neo-nationalism and populism. Okay, this is the book that came out from that lecture series, and we are so happy that we can keep this long-term friendship. But in order to more appropriately introduce her, because I'm only a friend, but Marima, also from Bosnia, former Yugoslavia background, and Marima Omerachik has studied Rada's work, and maybe Marima, our postdoc fellow here at the center, maybe you introduce yourself briefly first and why you are so connected with Rada's work. Okay, all right, about anti-war and feminism and everything. Okay, yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Liu. Rada, welcome again officially. I'm Marima Omerachik, postdoctoral researcher at International Center for Cultural Studies here and at NYCU. Me and Rada, we are like started first, I think through the literature, to the books and to the texts that we shared together. Rada was actually one of the authors that I have read first in feminism, in the field of feminism, actually post-Yugoslavian, and before, while Yugoslavia was still alive. So, and I have read all her, almost all her texts and essays and important writings on dissolution and wars in Yugoslavia also. So it was my big experience and big knowledge and big important point of view towards wars. So, and later we met and started to work together in one project. So yes, that will be for now. But first I want to introduce you Professor Iveković. So she's a Yugoslavian-born philosopher, as well as a political, feminist, philosophy and language and translation researcher, which is really important. One of her last books is dedicated to the philosophy of translation in a cultural sense. She's currently based in Paris, and Professor Iveković pursued her academic studies in philosophy first in Yugoslavia at University of Zagreb, and then obtained a doctorate from the University of Delhi in India. And then, of course, habilitation in French academic institution. Her background includes also her working experience at the University of Zagreb, University of Paris 8, and as well other experience. For example, her visiting professorships in America, in Europe, but of course in Asia, in Indian universities, National University of Singapore, and of course our school. So her research focus is on comparative philosophy, Asian, particularly Indian, and also Western philosophy, feminist theory, political philosophy, and philosophy of translation. Rada Iveković is a prominent proponent of anti-nationalist, anti-racist, and anti-patriarchal stance, which is direct opposition to the national and patriarchal narratives. She explores wide range of the phenomena and topics, which is emphasis on the feminist, post-colonial, and decolonial frameworks. The scope of her studies is extensive, encompassing of the multitude of subjects, including, but not limited to, exploration of nation and nationalism, the examination of the state and citizenship, the analysis of dynamics of violence and war, the interrogation of the borders, the dissection of democratic systems, and in-depth study of migration, as well as a European identity and profound inquiry of identity general, language and translation, and critical evaluation of gender inequalities. Rada Iveković is also author of numerous notable books. For example, that book that Professor Liu mentioned is one of her last ones, but also she published in different languages, mainly in the European languages. I will mention some of her books. Again, Captive Gender, Ethnic Stereotypes and Cultural Boundaries. Of course, her books that are published in French language regard the gender and nation. She published also around 15 academic books in Indian studies and numerous articles in the country's major cultural centers until the 19th and violent war disintegration of Yugoslavia. In the midst of those challenging circumstances, she published two important books in Italy, La Balcanzione della Regione e Autopsia di Balcani, both dedicated to researching of Balkans in that challenging time of the 90s. And furthermore, Professor Iveković is not just author or co-author of the numerous books, articles, essays, book chapters, and also she contributed as a co-editor to the various volumes and publications. And in that field I will just mention a couple of them, which are really important. As divided countries, separated cities, the modern legacy of partition. Of course, Captive Gender, Ethnic Stereotypes and Cultural Boundaries, and Partition, Reshaping State and Minds. Professor Iveković's research and works have been translated in numerous languages, and she herself writes in her native language, our native language, French and English, among others, as I know. So that will be all for now. So welcome, Rada, and
thank you so much, Madam. Let me explain the procedure of today's session. Okay, Rada will give a talk on new epistemology at the end of the word, but we requested her to relate the theme of this episteme, okay, to the issue of war, because it's all our experience, right? Civil war. Whether there is a just war, okay, and the aftermath of this civil war that caused numerous, countless people suffering unequal citizenship or decline of citizenship, okay, that will happen all over the world, and it's still going on. Of course, Taiwan has gone through that long civil war and also facing the war now. Okay, so today after Rada's talk for about an hour, we take a break, and then we'll start with Marima's reflection on this post-war situation or the war trauma, okay, that's affecting your generation, okay, and maybe younger generation. And Professor Zhu will also reflect on this Chinese historical trajectory through the Civil War to this island internal chaotic situation by facing the Taiwan Strait tension, but also, of course, the world difficult situation. So we are very happy that we can have this dialogue, okay, with Professor Iveković. So I'll give you the floor. Okay.
Thank you. Is this thing on? Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be here with you, to be here with my old friends, Joyce Liu and Yuan Hong Chu, whom I have known them for 20 years now. Professor Chu told me it has been 20 years. I wasn't aware of that. I thought it was a bit less. So much the better. So we have accumulated quite some karma together, and I'm very grateful for your warm way of receiving me, and grateful for your generous introduction, both Joyce and thank you, Marima, also for your very generous introduction. So, I had in mind for today a lecture to some extent theoretical, but then as we discussed the event among ourselves with Professor Chu and Professor Liu, I came to the conclusion that it would be a good idea, and Marima seemed to think so too, to add a practical part to it, namely not to insist only on the theoretical part. We have examples, and we have this feeling that everyone has at this, in this period, which seems like an end of the world. I'm saying it in a way ironically, but I hope it is ironical. One never knows what may happen today if we are in such a strange, we are in such strange times. We have come to the evidence everyone can see now that wars are all over. We grew up maybe, especially in Europe, because we were lucky. We grew up with the idea that wars are an exception and that they belong to the past. Now, even in Europe, we understand that wars are all over, that they are permanent, and actually they have always been, but we didn't want to know. And now we know, and theoreticians speak about. Yes, but I can't resist. I must give you some of my theoretical part, and then we shall come back to the issue of war and the issue of partition. The Yugoslav war was a war and a civil war and a partition. And my first partition was completely theoretical because it was the Indian partition that I studied at university. And there are elements of resemblance. So, as the you see, we come to the evidence that the exhaustion of the Western paradigm of world organization has become blatant after the long domination of the West. And what happens is that we should recognize now a reciprocally incomplete but complementary and diversified transversality of knowledges and lifestyles. Before the world can be reconstructed on different basis, we find ourselves within the ruins. We are really today within the ruins of the classical modern state system, dominated by the West for only about the past 400 or 500 years, not more. So that there is no reason that it should last forever. In most failed political projects around the world, both East and West, and everywhere, North and South, including in Global East. And by the way, I recommend very much the book by our friend Jae-hyun Lim from Korea, from South Korea. He has this book, Global East. I recommend very much that you read it if you are interested in politics and in history. It is generally the practice that is blamed in these situations, and it is supposed that practice did not keep up with theory. And it was supposed that theory is abstractly and too optimistically deemed to be correct. Now this is also a binary, theory and practice. And it is a problematic binary too. And for the reconstruction towards a mature way of living together, a cosmopolitanism in sharing, we shall need new figures of imagination. We should imagine other kinds of politics and social arrangements. And imagination is the most difficult thing to get in politics. This is something that is really lacking in politics. It is difficult to imagine something that you do not have the experience of, right? To imagine something of a possible future. Actually, imagination bumps against the obstacle of that which has not been thought of. The unthought. People sometimes say the unthinkable. We say the unthinkable. But let's hope that things are not unthinkable. They are just temporarily unthinkable, but they have definitely been unthought of. And there are schools of thought where the unthought has been thought about. As for example, in Buddhism, you have the concept of avidya, ignorance, which is radical. It is there. It's the first thing is that we don't know where we come from and what is behind. But we have periods in history when such, and this brings us to thresholds in history. There are very important thresholds in history where things happen that we don't recognize and we don't know what is going to happen, we don't imagine, and so on. And these thresholds bring a new language or bring a confusion in the old language we have used since that, up to that time. We have semantic problems, language problems of language dynamics, and so on. And we are in situations where words acquire exactly the opposite meaning of what we thought they once had. So we see that when the word order falls apart, the language order falls apart too. And this happens all over history at such big thresholds in history. And one of them I was going to talk to you about is the end of the so-called end of the Cold War, which is and was a very significant threshold in Europe and in the West, and which is completely differently lived and imagined, I think, in Asia. So some of these thresholds in history are much deeper rifts, and fractures that then destabilize our knowledge systems that need to be reconstructed. And I think that we are again at one such period. But I felt we were at one such time 35 years ago when in Europe the Berlin Wall fell, and we thought it was the end of the Cold War. At that time, I came to live in France, and I had no political language to share with my French colleagues, and not the same experience to share with them. So this was very complicated. Now today, in addition of having one such threshold which is always and always these are thresholds also in language, we have artificial intelligence. We have internet and all of this that has made such a big disruption in our knowledge systems. So we have to reconstruct. I wouldn't know how to reconstruct it. So I can only note the evidence, but I cannot give you recipes. So these different contexts are very hard to think. We, of course, have to accept the evolution of society, also of language, even of specialized vocabularies, but it becomes much harder to do, and we don't yet master this situation. Over the last several decades, we have all had, although from different thinking traditions, the experience of unexpected events and explanations of the world and its order, including the language order we find ourselves in. Facing the failure of our understanding and interpretation. Because it is not only the failure of the construction of the world we live in, it is also our failure to understand it, but also a failure in language, all of it together. And there have been so many new things added to it, and as I said, the digital dimension too, that we are in a kind of something that several of us, I'm not the only one, called a period of Confucianism. Confucianism, someone asked me, is this like Confucianism? Confucianism? How do you say in English? Confucianism. Yeah, it's not Confucius, it's not that. It's confusion, right? Confusion, systemic disruption, which seems to be another system. And what happened in the meantime? In the meantime, we had this modernity, which was practically Western modernity, but forcefully universalized, forcefully imposed to the planet, which had produced at the time, right, the historic modernity in Europe had produced continuity for the West and interruption in apprehending non-European cultures, histories, languages, for which there is indeed supposed to be only discontinuity with their own antiquity. Right? The only recognized antiquity by Western modernity is Western, or was Western. Now, of course, we all have come to doubt about it, but we are always at least one war too late, but usually much more. So the past of these other non-Western cultures and countries and traditions has counted as pre-modern, right? Pre-modern and traditional, whereas the West was modern and timely, and the non-West was belated by normative modernity, which was forcefully universalized. Modernity has been one of the great thresholds of the past, one of the great disjunctions that throws many, but not all, Western norms in history for all of us, East and West, North and South. Western modernity has constructed an unbroken genealogical and etymological origin for its own concepts and epistemes as universal. Modernity posits the subject as an autonomous figure corresponding to Western-like sovereignty, both state sovereignty and individual sovereignty, if you want, or autonomy. Actually, the national state, it is about the national state, while referring it exclusively to the dominant and hegemonic model. But alternative forms have never completely disappeared. They have existed all the time. They are merging with configurations of multiple power vectors within non-transparent networks of blurred and interlinked hierarchies. I have respectively identified, I'm not the only one, several such historic thresholds. I have already mentioned to you 2 or 3 of them. That of modernity, that such thresholds that have represented a turning point in the world order, but also a turning point in knowledge, in our understanding of the world. And they may vary locally from personal to historic to international, from Asia to Europe, from Taiwan to China, and so on. And many of them are also quite dependent on the position of the subject dealing with them. If I look at it, and these problems from the West, or if I look at them from the South, it is not the same. I don't see the same thing. The end of the so-called end of the Cold War brought many hopes of a non-binary world and of a post-binary, non-linear approach to knowledge, of a change of paradigm, of a reunited Europe, especially in Europe. This was what was the hope, and a united world. Hopes that did not come true, actually. You should read Jae-Hyun Lim's book, Global East, to really see what it is about. And we must understand that we have to do with different political logics. Now I shall skip most of my Indian part about it, but I was going to say, only briefly I will mention it nevertheless, there are philosophers in India and elsewhere, not only in the West, who understand this problem of binary thinking. It is conflictual thinking against and not with someone, right? And so it is us against them, or vice versa. There was this philosopher Kalidas Bhattacharya who published a book, Alternative Standpoints in Philosophy. This was in the 70s, I think. His father was also a great philosopher, Krishna Chandra Bhattacharya, who wrote about the subject from non-binary Indian position, the subject being not opposed to the object, but the subject being intrinsically freedom itself. I cannot develop that, it is too long now here to develop. And there are other examples. Binary logics and divisions are older than the Cold War. The Cold War is only one example, one among many. Gender, by the way, gender is also an example of a binary division. And binary logics are reductive, they are murderers, absolutely murderers, and they lead to wars. But comparable dualisms exist both east and west. It is not as if other continents would not think of that. And there is this binary I mentioned again, theory and practice, which is particularly toxic, it's a Western one, because it gives advantage to theory while despising practice, and so much the worse for practice if it doesn't agree with the theory. This is where all our political projects have failed. Socialism has failed on it. Theory was supposed to be good, and then in practice it didn't work. But capitalism is failing in pretty much the same way. So immediately after the fall of the Cold War, there appeared for a while that the US would dominate the world. This was way before Trump. If there were reminiscences of those times, but in another situation. At that time, I say in the years 1989, this is the fall of the Berlin Wall, and I say the years in the plural purposely, because it's a longer period, it's not 1 year. At that time, there is no other option, we were told. There is an old expression that we in Europe get in Latin, tertium non datum, which means there is no third option. I was trying to see whether I can write it down for you. Tertium non datum, if you want me to write it down for you later, we can do so. President George H.W. Bush declared unilaterally in 1992, by the grace of God, America won the Cold War. And as if the Berlin Wall had fallen only on one side. And we see today that it's a longer process, and it is falling also on the other side. But before him, Margaret Thatcher had said, T-I-N-A, there is no alternative. There is no alternative to liberalism, neoliberalism at that time. And also, she used to say there is no such thing as society. At least for the West, but also for much of the world appeared to be united under the then only remaining and visible superpower, the USA. Today it's more complicated because we have several superpowers competing. We have Russia, because that was also the fall of the Soviet Union, right, and of historic socialisms in the plural. So the Soviet Union has disappeared. In the meantime, China came out as a big power, to the very big surprise of us in the West. For us, it was overnight. We didn't know it was happening. We woke up one day and we saw China. It was a very big surprise. So China reappeared in that role later, but later only for Europe. I think that you people out here were aware of that. So the end of the binary proper of the historic Cold War, which is supposed to have ended in 1989, ushered in a temporarily ideal shared idea of a common world, undivided, and this non-division did not work either. Today we are in a more complex situation, but today the saying tertium non datur, which means there is no third option. That principle, which we have in Europe, we have it from Aristotle, but then we get it in Latin and not in Greek. That principle heavily damages and limits the possibility of building new solutions, which do exist but are hidden. The other solutions, the other options are hidden by that adamant assertion of binary logics. There is no other solution. There is no other option. It is, on the contrary, other alternatives that offer solutions and plural choices. The tertium non datur principle still remains a knowledge operator today. New binaries do pop up regularly, but also non-binaries, non-binary options. And briefly, yes, I said already, there is this gender dimension to it. It is much more difficult to think in such a world than it was to think in a black and white world of the Cold War. Socialism versus capitalism, East versus West, North versus South, and so on. And we are a bit lost. And then Trump today, with his hyper-egoistic and toxic principle, MAGA, Make America Great Again, is neither new nor original and has many imitators, East and West. His stance is contradictory. MAGA, the principle of MAGA, is contradictory and inconsistent. And also amazingly, but willingly ignorant of history, of international law, of human rights, of democracy as a project, ignorant of basic decency and ecology, as well as of climate change and of everything, because it only supports the rule of the strongest and produces thereby a major paradox. Within the pattern of the rule of the strongest, dominated by the most armed, most extractionist, most imperialist, most neo-colonialist, and most racist, as well as most misogynist, which has been imposed not only by force, but also through forced universalization, not only by physical force. There is a forced universalization of that model and its globalization in spite of the pretended abdication of globalism. Because we are at a strange time of, globalization, okay, but we also see that globalization has come to an end. And we are here again on a threshold. Now, I have something about, I shall have to skip that, about the French philosopher Etienne Balibar, who is interesting for several things that I'm thinking of in this paper, and he calls them catastrophes. He says there are three catastrophes. There are three catastrophes today. Three catastrophes that we are aware of, maybe many more. He says, I shall quote him, and he says, I speak of a digital catastrophe, but I primarily use the word catastrophe in the etymological sense, designating a brutal reversal of the order and meaning of our actions and our established mutual relationships. End of the quote. This is to explain that catastrophe, the word catastrophe is not used in the everyday sense, right? It is used as a situation of reversal. He has other examples of catastrophes, right? He calls the digital catastrophe a catastrophe. He calls war, constant war, a catastrophe. This is where he is interesting for us. And then what is the third? The ecological climatic catastrophe. Catastrophes concern the humans, all the humans, but also all forms of life. Bruno Latour, also a French philosopher and scientist who disappeared not long ago, he also used the term catastrophe in the same sense, and he reminds us that we live within the system that we are studying, that we are trying to understand. It is not as if we could think it from outside, which we all the time pretend to be doing, but we can't actually access the world from outside at this point. We can have games about doing it on the internet, digital games about reaching from outside. And this thing that we are inside, it means other people, Latour also, but also other people, have called a planetary situation. We are in a planetary situation, which means that we need to think not only from our individual or our nation's point of view or our species point of view. We need to think from within the system as being part of it, which means that we need to become much more modest, much more modest. Yes, I have to skip much of this. Balibar has another interesting distinction of three, which is generical difference, which means gender. He speaks of three differences that look like irreducible or resist being reduced and resist understanding. One is gender. One is, of course, always use inverted commas, the abnormal, and then three, race or culture. Right? And he calls them anthropological, the three anthropological differences. This is the element in which universality asserts itself, he says, at the price of revealing its contradictions. Universality reveals itself in anthropological differences, but at a price of being incomplete. Right? Psychoanalysts have been saying this long ago in another way. They used to say that you have totality, but how do you think about totality? You can't think totality unless you think an exception to it, otherwise there is no totality. So if you take a circle, right, as totality, you will, the exception will be one slice in the circle, right, or in the cake. You can figuratively represent it like that. It is the same that Latour is saying and Balibar also. I could debate with, and I debate on these things with Balibar, especially about gender. That is debatable, but not only gender, race, and etc., especially nation. What is a nationality? What is an identity? All these things are actually not cannot be defined, right? They are approximate. Our language can't be precise. Not only because of that slice of exception in the totality, but also of how language is constructed. So we have these three anthropological differences and three catastrophes, of which one is war. Now I'm skipping a lot of it. War has been, for my generation, in the Balkans, in Yugoslavia, an unthought of. Why? Because war was behind us. It was World War II. It was World War II. For me, World War II, of course, World War I, which was not even my parents' war, but my parents took part in World War II. And my generation then had no war to fight because they had fought the war for us, constructing our world and our country the best way they could or they thought they should to make us happy. And by doing this, they made us unpolitical because they gave us a given solution that we really were not expected to discuss. And we didn't discuss it for a very long time. We started discussing it when the war broke out, and the war broke out with my generation. I'm almost 80. My generation, men of my generation, fought that war, right? Started the war. After the end of the Cold War, there was something of those unthinkables and unthought of came back to all of us, both East and West and North and South, for many parallel and interrelated reasons. Because catastrophes manifest themselves as political positional challenges in crisis zones. This is what Latour says. Crisis zones of the subject to be resolved, whereby the subject, his, her, or their identity may be recast or challenged too, right? In such situation, you may become someone else, or acquire, or be, rather, what happens? You are imposed another identity. You get another label in the war of my generation, of which we shall talk about. There was a situation where you couldn't choose how to describe yourself. You were to be either this or that. And again, there was no third option. For example, you had to be either a Serb or a Croat. And there was no other option. 4 or 5 days ago, I met someone again in France, a very reasonable and a good sociologist, who asked me again, are you a Serb or a Croat? I said, don't ask me that question, this is why I went away. Why should I be a Serb or a Croat if I prefer to be a penguin? So, I mean, these are periods when such options are imposed to you and you have no choice. And this is what people fight about. In Yugoslavia, it was much more complicated because there were not only Serbs and Croats, there were many more. Right? With Merima later on, we shall tell you about it. But we have dual terms constructing each of these particular situations. We have binaries that are proposed for the description of each of these particular situations. Now let me see if I have do I have a blackboard? No?
You can write it.
Can I just write one thing? first, yeah, it's first I think the expression I was telling you in Latin, but it's important. This is tertium non datur. Tertium means third, non means non, datur gives, not, it is not given. A third is not given, tertium non datur. On the contrary, what I claim is tertium datur, of course, and this will save us. So, this is the politics I suggest, and this is what we need to understand. Now, I was going briefly to give you this formula about universalization, which is good also for understanding gender, but any dual construction, binary construction that is irreducible, because there are flexible binary constructions and there are friendly binary constructions where it doesn't matter. But there are binary constructions that are fixed, where you can't move anything, and when they ask you, are you a man or a woman? What do the people who are in between do? They can't respond to that, you see. So we have A, and we have A plus B. So we have this formula works for gender, but also for other binaries. And this is how the universal works. The universal as universalization. Let's take this formula here. A is a universal, right? It is totality. It is the totality which I said. This is A. And within the totality of A, we have A, B, C, D, how many you want? A, B, C, etc. Let's say that this is a slice. This is a slice. The slices within the totality are particulars. What is a universal made of? It is made of particular elements. We don't see all the particular elements. We see only two because we are reduced to this ridiculously limiting way of thinking through only two elements, which is the most easy way of thinking. This is why it is. So we have a universal, which consists of A and B. The universal is A. and then it consists of A and B, and we don't care about the rest, but there are also other elements. We only see the two. Now, one of them is directly universalizable, because it is A, right? So this one resembles more to the universal pattern, to the universal model, than this one. This one will be the exception. It is here. If you put it in terms of gender, if you say man in the English language is not very good for this, because it has it has two different words, right, for man and a woman. But say in some languages, in French, you say homme, which means both men in the universal sense, and it means men in the particular sense. So a human being is homme, and a man is homme in French. But in English, we have men for both. Never mind. We have in men in the sense of human being, we have men and women. If we use the same word for these two, then this one is more similar to the pattern, and gets directly more power. Directly, because he belongs to the culture that brings this form of life with it. Right? The universal is one such thing that agrees very easily with domination, falls in with domination, and the particular differences fall out of the universal and play the part of the dominating. This is now, you can use it for all other examples, East, West, and so Jae-Hyun Lim in his book, Global East, he deconstructs this formula excellently on the example of Europe and Asia, and also Europe as the West in the sense of the universal thing, and Asia. And it is actually the same formula, I think. So now what happens today? We must constantly return to language. This question bugs us through language also, right? And it operates translation, it operates displacement and changes of meaning, whereby we would already find ourselves in a plurality if we could, but we have obstacles to get access to that plurality because of the force of this formula, of these logics, right? Because if you stick to the binary logics, you don't want to make compromises. Right? If you don't want to make compromises, you go to conflict. If you want to avoid conflict, you must make some compromises. You must be more inclusive. And this is very difficult to do. So what happens is that we are in a different situation nowadays, in at least my generation, than the world we grew up with. And we are in a situation of multiple communities of meaning that we are aware of, which existed also before, but we were not aware of them. And And now if they each want only their own thing, it will be very complicated to get from the local to the global and vice versa. And also the problem is that we now have multiple, numerous systems of parallel and contradictory value systems. We now have fake news. We now have fake truth, alternative truth we have with Trump, right? Alternative, and what does he say? Alternative facts, he says, Trump. So we have alternative facts. What do we do with alternative facts? You have facts and alternative facts. You don't know what to think and you don't know where you are. This is very confusing. And this erases memory. It erases history. In other words, it will be even more difficult for us to orient ourselves with plural logics that we must admit we need to come to in some way, but that the Trump era is throwing us into before we could even work it out decently, right? Can we access a system of plural logics that are democratic and that are not hierarchical? This is the question, because we are accessing plural logics that are non-democratic and that are not open and that are not at all inclusive, that are exclusive. So it will require corresponding social politics, not only language, but politics and social politics also, to somehow get over the confusion and confusionism we are in. So, to a great extent, to my understanding, we are in a problem that is not only a problem of our materiality and the problem of the exhaustion of our resources, which is true. We are also there. It is ecology and the climate situation and everything. But we are also in a situation of lack of thinking capacity, right? Which is very problematic. So we are facing a world that we don't exactly, although there are many scenarios are proposed to us how to access or solve this situation. The future remains unknown and incomprehensible. It will always remain unknown and incomprehensible, but theory somehow, has a different, difficult problems here. So now I would just like to add a few sentences about war, to the practical thing that Professor Chu and Nerima and also Joyce also will help us untangle in a way. War. What is war? What can we do about war? My first reaction is, and I think everyone's first reaction is, that violence is not acceptable. Violence is not acceptable under no circumstances. And then one is reminded of circumstances where, although you don't want violence, and nobody wants it, violence happens, and you must resist. What is resistance? Resistance is also entering a relationship of violence. It is very complicated. It is very complicated to decide what is just violence and what is a non-just violence, because there are different viewpoints and we are in different situations. You see, when I studied the partition of India as a student of India and Pakistan, the Pakistani partition in 1946 to 1948, after the Britishers left and the violence happened between the two new countries, the two dominions. India and Pakistan were dominions under the Britishers. When I was young, the debate whether the partition was a war was a very, very difficult debate. It was not exactly considered as a war. Actually, it was a war by any description. But for Pakistan, for example, partition was very important because it was constitutive. It was constitutive of the country, Pakistan. Whereas India, that existed at least by name even before, because Pakistan was part of British India. India, and you see it's all in the names also. For India, partition was the violence of others, of the Pakistanis that wanted to, provoke the secession, which is very debatable because they did not provoke the secession out of the blue. They were driven to do it by Hindu majority pressures on the Muslims of India, right, of British India. So there was this partition where both countries incurred violence, and where women incurred terrible violence, and this is a separate chapter. I can tell you about it later, but this is really a very important chapter, what happened to women in that partition. Is it a war or a civil war? See, it was not recognized as any of these. Now in India they talk about civil war and about a war, or even more partition as a war. Well, in Yugoslavia something similar happened in the 90s. We had a decade of violence in all directions with an epicenter of one of the elements, one of the national elements of Yugoslavia that was more responsible, no doubt, but that was not the only one, because the other ones responded and resisted and this and that. And you know, violence produces counter-violence. You can't prevent it. This is the problem. Today it is still very difficult to say in Yugoslav countries that whether this was a war or a civil war, and in some part of the country you are not supposed to say that this was a civil war, right? You can't say it was a civil war, because for some of the Yugoslav countries it is, like for Pakistan, constitutive. The new country stems out of this violence. There was this wonderful Italian historian, Claudio Pavone. Claudio Pavone, he died a few years ago. He was a wonderful fellow. He talked and wrote about the conflict between two visions of the world, he said. And he was talking about World War II, which was very brutal in Italy and from Italy, because Italy was the first fascist country in Europe. So he says there are two visions of the world. There were two visions of the world. One, a democratic and anti-fascist vision, which the role was played by the partisans, by the resistance, right, to the fascists, resistance to fascism. And the other option was the cult of order. This was fascist. The cult of order, hierarchy, and violence as a political instrument. This is very frightening. Violence as a political instrument. This is, by the way, what Trump is playing now. On how violence works as a political instrument, I read another important Italian historian who is also a writer. He writes novels and he writes history in the novel form of novels. I can give you the names afterwards. His name is Antonio Scurati. He's our contemporary, somewhat younger than I. He's 4 books now. He has 4 books. I have read 3 out of them and should read the 4th, I hope, soon. These books are all 4 of them called all these books are called M for Mussolini. M for Mussolini, the leader of fascism. And the name of the writer is Antonio Scurati. And the first one is Claudio Pavone. Two extraordinary Italian historians, important ones. And when I read Scurati, I was really stunned by elements that I recognized as similar with what was going on in India with the Hindu right, the Hindutva right of Hindu nationalism today, where they aggress and chase Muslims, right? Because they do it through groups. It is not officially. It's not officially, of course, there is a lot of violence too on the political level. Of course, President Modi is himself in that mood. He is like an Indian Trump. But you have these militias. You have these militias that go and kill people, beat people, and so on. And this is what Mussolini's fascios, this is how it is called, fascism, right? Fascio is like, what do we call it? When you put together a bouquet of flowers, it's a fascio. It's several elements that are linked together. This is a fascio. And so fascio groups were groups of people who were violent. They were men, all of them. And they would go in villages in Emilia-Romagna and in the north of Italy, especially where it happened first, in the 1920s, right? and they would kill landowners, they would kill their workers, they would kill peasants, they would kill people, they were assassins, right? This is what fascists do, militias. This is what militias of different descriptions did in the Yugoslav war too, right? It's not a state army only. The state army can be bad in itself, of course it is, what else? But then you have these groups that are tolerated by the state and that are given the liberty of going around and assassinating people. So you need to read, if you come across, do read Scurati and Pavone. This is really something, and also you see when reading them, especially Scurati, you see how this can happen in a place where you don't expect it. The north of Italy, where it happened, where the fascists came up and assassinated people, and the area of Italy that was transformed into a truly fascist country was socialist at the time. It was red. It was a red country. See? And this is what they attacked. They attacked also ideology, but also they attacked economy very much. And land is important in such situations. So we mustn't underestimate resistance. I say this because earlier I said no violence is allowed, no violence is tolerable at all. Yes, but what do you do if you have these militias that come to your village and kill everyone? You resist. And I must say that I cannot condemn them for resisting. But I don't like the situation, right? I think that we should do something to prevent such situations. You must resist, of course. Resistance deserves our admiration. The partisans who resisted, for example, war in Italy, the fascist war. Because the Italians then, Italy went and conquered other lands across the sea and so on. But on the other hand, for example, the Poles had a great resistance during World War II in Europe. The Yugoslav partisans had a great resistance against both fascism, Italian fascism, and German Nazism. We had both in Yugoslavia. So you must resist. What else we would do? And here the issue remains open and forever unresolved. Is the violence always worth it? This is what we can ask ourselves. Is it okay to sacrifice one generation for the next? I am less sure that it is. But I think it's for everyone to decide. We definitely have also a gender issue here, although we cannot generalize. Many men and women think exactly the same. On whichever side they are, they think often the same. And women have taken part in resistance in World War II, absolutely, in Europe. They have taken part in resistance with men. Women can also be belligerent like men. They can. But who are the subjects that imagine and trigger wars? Who are the subjects who allow wars to happen? Well, there are people who are in power. Who is in power? Men, not women, right? So there is some simple and silly gender issue here, which is unthought of and which needs to be thought of. It is rarely women that are in power, still today. Second, it is men that are in power, yes, men that are in power, rarely women. Most people, both men and women, prefer peace, of course. Prefer peace, men and women prefer peace, but technically, it is some men who have been in power, and for some reason, now this is my real puzzle, for some reason, for some people, power is sexy. Why is power sexy? I don't know. It is sexy for those who aspire for it, who want power. And they are even ready to sacrifice their lives for it, and their neighbors for it, and their families for it. It makes them embrace violence, but historically, men have massively been prone to grab power and be predisposed for it more than women. We must say it. Why don't we say it? You only hear it in some feminist writing. You don't see it otherwise, hear it much otherwise. When women opt for power, we can know that they behave just like men. Those women that are, remember Thatcher and remember other women. They are, they have virility in them. There must be something additional. Women who are in power and want to go to war. Margaret Thatcher, I believe, went to war for the, what was that, the Maldives Islands? Falkland Islands, thank you, yes. And such silly places on the other end of the world, right, exactly. Why? I don't think that women should grab power. I rather think the contrary, that men should let go a little bit. What a waste of time and energy, the politics of a life for power, for a life for one's ego. Instead of living a full life, I think that men should learn from women, should learn from women and not the other way around. They should learn simple living, right? Grab life while you have it. Power to unleash violence is a disaster. It's a disaster. And it has something to do with psychology also. It is not only, it is history, of course, and everything that we have mentioned and many other things that I have not mentioned. But our civilization has been based on this disaster. And then since we are in a dissymmetry, in an asymmetry, because we are in binary models, of course, there is a lot, if not much, very much of responsibility on the West, that is again on those who were or who have been in power in the world at other levels, at all levels. I should stop here because otherwise it is endless. Thank you.
So much. No, perfect. I think, thank you so much. You have left us very profound questions to really think through. How do we comprehend our histories and how do we face our contemporaries? Can we make a right decision, a choice in front of the very pressing dilemma or looming war and and so on. So I will, let us take a break, 10 minutes, all right? And then we'll come back first with Marima and then with Yuan Hong, okay? And we can then continue our discussion. Right, thank you. Come back and start our second session. Marima will first offer us some of her maybe personal experience, okay, and also her reflection and observation through her very long-term study and research on literature, especially women feminist writing, okay, and also film. And I followed up with Professor Zhu Yuan Hong. Of course, Professor Zhu has a very also broad knowledge of either genocide or a civil war and its aftermath, and also his very keen observation of contemporary situation. And I also believe that we will have a very fruitful discussion afterwards, okay, where we really want to take this opportunity to conduct a more in-depth dialogue on this issue, this difficult situation. Okay, Marima.
Thank you, Professor Liu. I didn't mention when I was introducing myself at the beginning that I'm a Bosnian-born or Yugoslavian-born researcher also. So I born 3 or 5 years before the dissolution of Yugoslavia. I was a little girl, and basically I grew up in the Sarajevo, which is today capital of Bosnia and Herzegovina, but in that moment was just one of the cultural centers in Yugoslavia. I will not prefer exactly to talk about my personal experience on war, which is really difficult and traumatical, but I will try to be precise and to give the answers that may help to, in a way that actually war experience shaped my thought today and the way that I am approaching to the research and to literature and especially arts and film. So I was a small girl in a war, but generation of my parents and also as a Rada generation and generation older than her, we were all affected by the war. And the other night when was the projection, the screening of film by Tana Budisavljević, brilliant film on Second World War in region in Southeast Europe. I said something what was really thoughtful for me because I was thinking later after that on that. I said that basically right now in this moment I don't know any person in ex-Yugoslavia who still lives there who doesn't have on who war didn't affect. So we were in some kind of way a lost generation with references on war, trauma, loss, displacement, mutilation, loss of identity and gaining new identity, which often we do not agree, and other things, of course. So my experience in a besieged city, still if I was a little girl, was shaped me and served right now as a catalyst for my research and development of my scientific approach. So, as I mentioned it also the other night, the personal experience of war are really deep changing. So, my childhood again and experience of my family was really important for me to deal not just with the personal trauma, to work live with that, to have quality life, but also to transfer the knowledge and experience in a reading, in analyzing the world around that surrounds me. So first I started to read a lot, and after that, what was a logical move to me was to attend to Faculty of Philosophy, a course into literature, and that was one of the things that I was trying to understand what was happening to me, because the generation of my parents actually didn't. It's really interesting. Currently in Bosnia, we don't see that people a lot are talking about their experience. Like there is, it's a concluded subject. We don't touch it. It's really hard to find a way to talk about it. So and when I approached in an official way in academic studies, I faced it with a lot of problems, of course, because during the wars in Yugoslavia, academia played really big role in supporting sometimes in supporting nationalist politics. So sometimes the professors from that era were my professors also. So it was really difficult to have another approach, to not just be by my own ethnic group, because I didn't fit in that kind of narrative. So the most important things that I noticed beside of that strange situation in academia was that the truly and most important opposition to war horrors actually came from women. And that was really surprising if we have in mind that context and that great basis that Rada actually describes of binary opinion and the separation of the binary mind. So it was really important for me to see it's in literature where just basic division. We had, and still we have 30 years after the war, the most popular writing and filmmaking is still on wars. So, and basic division was like, you are still having that famous narrative, which is basically male narrative, and it's connected to direct experience in a war, sometimes from front, from fire line. And then you have experience that it's in the background of the war. We talk about civilians, we talk about the women, the children, elderly, and you cannot read that kind of literature in schools, in faculties, and they are not part of the curricula, of course. And the other thing was that most of those women writers had suffered really much during the wars in Yugoslavia, because in a lot of the options they were publicly against the war, against the politics. So they were not. They declared sometimes as a betrayer of their nations. They went to exile. They were basically called witches. So we right now see how the patriarchy ideology and of course together with nationalism actually works in a field. So after that, I started to deep research and to read. It was really difficult because after the wars in Yugoslavia and the solution, we faced it with like 5-6 new countries, and still it is really hard to go to other countries and to find literature and to make research there. And especially if you have in mind that women writers are often marginalized, they were not really received in a period of war, and of course after the war. So I started again to continue with the reading and researching, and it's not just enough to read and to know things. You should make theoretical framework that will function, that you can put together different women writers from right now different nations, from different groups, from different cities, from different countries which were in war in that time. And it's really interesting to see how they are writing on the same war and from different parts between the border, which is often in blood. So, and I created something that I called a concept of post-Yugoslav anti-war women's writing. And it's really interesting because this word, anti-war, and that is the main characteristic of their writing, because they do not write just stories of winners, nationalist stories. Those are the stories that came from national writers. So in that concept, I incorporated women authors and works from the cities that were most affected by the war in Yugoslavia. So I had interesting writings, for example, from besieged Sarajevo. It was a couple of women writers who wrote about the experience of besieged Sarajevo and who addressed the problems on nationalism and politics. And sometimes the people say that was one of the issues that I faced most. Like, do you think that maybe if you go with that kind of approach, you will facing problem with the auto-stereotypization? You said like women writing pacifist things, but indeed, in practices, women are really writing pacifist things, and they were the bridge that preserved all that area during Yugoslavia, not just in writings. You can the writing in that sense is really flexible. You can think about activist writings. We had during Yugoslavia, we had of course amazing activist group, Women in Belgrade, Women in Black from Belgrade, and they are writing too. They write essays, so you should definitely read and discuss on them and think on them, not just as a literature, not just on a pseudo document, but also as a great tool to understand. So, and then, of course, you have different genres, which was really important for me as a literary theorist. So, a woman were writing letters. For example, in my doctoral dissertation, I was analyzing letters that Rada actually shared during the war, and via correspondence with other 4 or 5 women intellectuals. So, and of course, amazing writers who were writing in novels on exile, who were writing about body experience of the war, which is for women really hard and difficult. So, of course, and childhood in the war, and many other topics. So the genre, it's really the interesting if you have that autobiographical sense, and of course if you have fiction, which is also interesting to analyze, because it's not pure history. You cannot forget that the world of real literature is a self-sufficient world. You need to have the tools to understand it, because in the case of the wars, in the themes of the wars, wars shape the literature, and literature shows how one of the many stories could look like. So, and other most amazing thing which is connected to women's writing on the war is something that I call personal history, because in history you don't find particular stories. So, and in a war novels, for example, by male author, you don't find sometimes that kind of stories, but sometimes in a woman's writing you find that kind of experiences. And in this concept of post-Yugoslav anti-war women's literature, it's really important, that sense of resistance, and that idea that in the front of all borders and across all borders, there are living the human beings which were our friends and our families. So our ethical duty is to have sentiment towards them. So, and that is the other thing that is really important for anti-war women's literature, that ethical engagement. Sometimes I was thinking that that idea is too utopical, and sometimes I was thinking that it's overcome, because first time when I was processing that idea, it was in a book by French philosopher and writer Jean-Paul Sartre, and his famous book, What is Literature? It was really important book. It was he was writing and published it like maybe 2 or 3 years after Second World War, and one of his statements is really that literature should be engaged, because every time that you put a couple of words in one sentence, it's engagement. It's some kind of engagement. And his question, it's a question that I often write in my own research. It's do ethical engagement in literature, in arts, in film affects aesthetical? So it's really interesting and big question. So I will try to be really short right now, just to conclude this. There's something also in my intention to analyze the wars in Yugoslavia that reminds me constantly on Virginia Woolf and her saying that sexual instinct that leads men to wars and women to resistance, because they asked together their brothers and men to defend the country in their name. So the woman, brave woman in Yugoslavia actually said, "Not in my name. We don't want that you are making wars in our name." So that was really important. I will also use one important sentence by one famous writer from ex-Yugoslavia, Dubravka Ugrasić, in her book Kultura laži, or Culture of Lies. She said that actually male war was that woke disintegration of cohesive idea of Yugoslavia. So she pointed out that women were, after the war was ended, they were ones who fixed the broken things, clean up the trash, remove men's shit, and wash everything. And that is not new idea. If you read a little bit around, you will find one interesting poem by a famous novelist, poet from Poland, Wisława Szymborska, who said something similar. I will paraphrase now in this moment, after the war, woman or the one who cleans everything. So of course, in my research, I managed to rediscover and to put in one place together, in one framework, different writers from all cities and all big cultural centers from ex-Yugoslavia, and that was really important for me personally, from position of my personal experience and trauma, but also it was really important for the community, even if I was refused in that community, because I advised to make the story and make research on my own ethnic community, and often in that kind of advisement I received such a horrible statements, who they were trying to beat me, testing my emotions actually, and testing my trauma and my response to that new situation. So, and I will conclude just with two important things. I think that women writers who wrote on war, not just in Yugoslavia, but also in other literatures, in literatures that are connected with the experience of other wars, for example, Second World War, First World War, of course, in other continents also, it's really important to think on that, because right now I'm researching this East Asian context of Taiwan, Hong Kong, South Korea, who had Rada's experience, of course, during 20th century. So women were really heroes of that war. And how to conclude this talk? I think it's most important that today, when we think about the wars, we can easily avoid them. We cannot see them. We can, as Susan Sontag stated in one of her brilliant book of essay, it was her thought related to the wars in Bosnia. She said, okay, but if you are enough with that media that are monitoring the wars in Bosnia, you can always switch the channel. So that is the thing that we are doing today. And sometimes I think today we see in the media, we see just Ukraine and Palestine, which is really horrible. And I think that I will state something, but we can discuss later on that issues. I was surprised also because I was writing one other article on one documentary on war, and I was taught with the idea how many there is wars in this moment right now, and I find statistically data it's more than 110 armed conflicts today, and we know just about Palestine and Ukraine, and we switch the channels. It's the most easiest option. So, and my question is, if we are not bored and too affected by this because we have our own comfort and we are living in a state of mind that we are thinking that war cannot happen and that war cannot affect us. So I'm really concerned about the future and the thing that we do not want to see and we do not want to know. So, and sometimes I think that we are silent because we really think that evil will not come for us, but it comes from other people, from other human beings. Like it was case in the Second World War. It was really famous thought in, especially in Yugoslavia, next Yugoslavia. It was like, okay, in my building, people, Nazis or Ustaša and Chetniks are coming for our neighbors. But we are okay, they do not touch us. But we never know. So that is all. Sorry if I take the more time that we need. Thank you.
So happy to see Rada here again. We have 20 years ago. Yes, but I should add one more piece of introduction of Rada. Back to 2010, I was in a sabbatical visiting Paris 8 University, and the apartment I rent in Paris is only a few blocks away from Rada's apartment. And then Rada warmly, invite me to almost every week. Yeah, almost every week to her apartment and for a party, And then I know, it's almost like a center of something because Chantal and Ernest Clau coming from London and maybe 3 or 4 times. And Nancy Fraser from New York, so I still remember that kind of gathering in Rada's apartment. Yeah. Okay, for today, I should maybe put out my outline for the discussion. The first question is new epistemology at the end of the work. I should discuss how and why necessary this kind of technological expression.
Didn't I put commas, inverted commas? No?
Oh, okay. But still, the structure is eschatological 末世论，末世论的问题结构，因为太熟悉了。Yeah. So I'm quite alert with this because it comes from so many philosophers with the Christian background, with Marxist background, all have this kind of eschatological expression, and sometimes with the messianic view of it. Yeah. Yes. The end of the Cold War, and then comes Fukuyama's work, the end of history. Okay? So, according to Fukuyama, the ideological wars between on fascism is the end, on communism is the end, socialism is the end. And then, well, only the Western liberalism may be effective. So that's no longer these kind of ideological struggles on the end of history. But right after that, we still see this kind of eschatological expression everywhere. You know, for example, like Russian philosopher, sociologist, Dugin, Alexander Dugin. So he said that, okay, now the Western liberalism are at its final breath. Okay, so all this expression of the end of this, the end of that, and then are pointing toward something of a new mission. Okay, call it a messianic or something. Here we have a minor one, new epistemology. Okay, so that's why I'm saying that this kind of expression is necessary, just as the binary thinking that we never escape from. I don't know whether we can someday escape from this binary thinking. But as the philosopher Jacques Derrida, his idea of deconstruction is exactly pointing toward this kind of binary construction, not only binary, but always with value difference, discrimination. This symmetry of value. Man, woman, modern, or pre-modern, or traditional, something. Always this. So, but he said that the mission of the task of deconstruction can never be fulfilled, because fulfilled, completely fulfilled. Yeah, because that kind of binary thinking will always be reconstructed, constructed again and again. And I don't think maybe these we can really escape from this. Okay. The second one is modernity. Okay. As Rada expressed, the force to universalize the modernity. Yeah. Okay. So this is something. Okay. I remind me. Stuart Hall said, and every universalized modernity, there is a built-in scale, scale. So that scale, even was more persistent than binary. For example, here we have this universalized this, and so we have the particular of A, B, C, D, yeah, whatever. Maybe you can have 12 of them, but that modernity, idea of modernity, always already got the scale to range them or something. So you got something like positive value, some negative, or yeah. I would bring in for my question. I would bring in the more more modern. The term modern appeared in the Western language, English, French, or other language. Modern, it has a simple meaning. These things happen or appeared only in our time. We never seen it before. You know, it's we never seen it before. So these things we call it modern. Okay, modern. So if we return to this kind of simple definition of modern, then we would say that modernity not necessarily with this, to put under the so-called Western. Sometimes it happened not, of course, like nation state or something like this. It emerged firstly in Europe, but not everything is we call it modern coming from the Western cities centers like London, Paris, or Berlin. Many things happened, appeared in, for example, like Shanghai International Settlement, maybe in Singapore, maybe in Calcutta, maybe in St. Paul or something. This kind of place rather than London, Paris, or Berlin. And if we put it this simple definition, we would not think modernity only as positive value. For example, like the so-called fascist regime and the communist regime in the 20th century, they are modern. Okay, and then the event, like maybe organized by some people in the desolate mountains of Afghanistan, and using hijacked commercial plane to destroy the so-called Twin Tower at the heart, at the center of a formidable empire. Okay, this is modern. We never have these kind of things, in history. So in this way, then we will see modern, not necessarily positive coming from the West or something like that, but it's a more visible in other forms. Yeah. So that's my opinion on so-called modernity. And then the third one is another term which is an eschatological keyword. That's catastrophe. Okay. Catastrophe also. For example, let me think. So many of the Western, including Marx, down to the Italian philosopher Agamben, they have many expressions like this, and it's always associated with so-called catastrophe the moment of intensified catastrophic moment, but they are path to some kind of redemptive moment. So catastrophe very often associated with messianic, redemption or redemptive moment as a path of them. To me, I think Etienne Balibar has less this kind of connotation of that. But it's quite common as we always think of Hölderlin's poem. When the catastrophic dangers grow, so grows the redemptive saving power. Okay. Yeah. So this kind of is also very common. But reading Balibar, I think he has a special expression in his book, Violence and Civility. And then there's, I think he is also thinking of the Balkans violence. And he said that, this one definition I think is very convincing. He said that when was the catastrophe? For example, is when the civility may be fortified by Marshal Tito's so-called brotherhood and unity. These kind of at least maybe 35 years civility without ugly ethnic conflicts. But someday, this kind of civility just break into some kind of violence and cruelty of ethnic cleansing, ethnic forced migration or something like that. We can call that kind of conversion. That's kind of breaking down catastrophe. I would say that is a very good example for the catastrophe. Okay. Now turn to so-called civil war, and sometimes it's related to the question of thought. Civil war. Okay. The fall of Berlin Wall and down to the end of USSR happens at the age of 33. Just during the years I obtained my PhD degree. So to my life, 33 years I lived under the Cold War system, and then I feel this kind of change in Soviet Union and Eastern. Mostly, I feel a great relief, something like that, because I will agree with Herman's expression. It's a very interesting article. He expressed two generations respond to this, and he said that for younger her, right? He said that system to her is only oppressively boring. Okay, is her expression. I agree with that. So I see the end of that system comes to me as a relief. Till that violence in Balkan happened, the Yugoslavia happened, and it surprised me, and say that there's something really even more uglier than the socialist system. Okay, after the socialist system, yes, that's my feeling. But then I would say that so-called, I would agree with Rada, this is very hard to call it, I mean, in the Balkan War, it's hard to call it civil war because to many newly established nation state, it's constitutive. It's constitutive. As the Second Balkan War and the First Balkan War and the Second Balkan War at the early phase of 20th century. Similarly, yeah, these kind of violence are constitutive of these countries coming from the so-called Ottoman Empire. Okay. Yeah. So, and the Balkan is not the first. The whole Europe, in that 2 centuries, you see this kind of separation becoming constitutive of the new nation state, violence and war, all that. But I want to talk about another war questions, the civil war in Soviet Union and China. Okay, as we know, Soviet Union, not Soviet, before Soviet Union, in Russia, there's a Russian civil war from 1918 through 1922. And then China from 1946, 46, 45 through 1949, right? We recognize that as a Chinese civil war, Russian-China civil war, but the civil war actually never ended with the establishment of the People's Republic of China and the USSR. All through this regime, it's constant civil war. Not the first few years of the land reform, the suppression of counter-revolutionaries, and this or that, and then anti-rightist campaign, and then the counter-revolutions, and then, I'm referring to China, and then 1989 Tiananmen massacre, because the day of June 4th, the Renmin日报 stimulate that on the Tiananmen Square there are a bunch of counter-revolutionaries, and they are claimed by that. But back to the counter-revolution, they are purged. Everything they purged. Some young people are executed very quickly. Oh yes, this swift execution is also a key sign of this so-called this regime. I would say that if they are not civil war, what is this kind of a campaign or one after the other, and millions of victims swiftly executed, something like that. And then I would say that refers to USSR. If there's what is the Great Purge in the 30s, so-called the Moscow show trial. What is that? And then what is the Gulag? So actually, there's a term to describe Soviet Union and China. We call it war communism, but it originally refers to those years of civil war. But this war communism lasted throughout this regime because their character, not only so-called political or economic policy, but the swift execution after maybe show trial or something like that. So I would say that the civil war communism, not limited to the civil war years, but the whole through these Russian and Chinese regime, But I think Yugoslavia is somehow different. It's not. I'm so curious to find out because Marshal Tito and his legitimacy of his coming from his partisan the leadership of communist partisan war, of course there and then there's a so-called brotherhood and unity emphasis of these, and of course with some suppression that at least for 35 years there's no ugly things. Probably there's some because and then I checked out. The Civil War, the victim and the object of Civil War have a family name, counter-revolutionaries, 反革命. There are 7 generations at least, including those purged by the Gang of Four in China, and then the Gang of Four was tried, historical tried in the 1980s as counter-revolutionaries. And then the same year, 1980, they tried, Hsinchu, who are totally irrelevant with the Gang of Four, but raised the question of the fifth modernization, post-big character poster at Beijing. So what is this last protracted civil war? Their victim and their objective is so-called counter-revolutionaries, family name. But the counter-revolutionaries is a strange family because, who are they? You cannot, assure that I'm coming from proletariat or peasant class, so I won't be counter-revolutionary. You can't assure you that I'm, a long-standing communist cadre or something like that. No. None of that can assure you not becoming counter-revolutionaries. So each counter-revolutionaries are.
We need to leave.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Almost. Yeah. So the counter-revolutionaries are, depends on who on the top have the power to signify who is the counter-revolutionaries. And so I come back to check on Yugoslavia and the detail, and there indeed is counter-revolutionaries. So at the same time you have unity, brotherhood and unity, but on the other hand there's a new anthropological difference, coming from counter-revolutionaries. And then one of them, maybe Milovan, who are communist elite, quite high ranking, but then was deposed and then imprisoned. And we have that in Hungary, in Nagy, and then later in Czech, Dubček. These kind of things. Okay, so I think I can end it here. I already raised enough questions, enough discussion. Thank you.
If I don't stop you, you can continue for another 30 minutes. Rada, if you allow me, I would like to open up for questions from the floor or online before maybe we wrap up at the end, okay, so that we can utilize the remaining time fully. So if you have a question, I believe someone here is already, so 文轩，你帮我把那个麦克风传过去。And our friends online, you're also welcome to raise questions.
Yeah. So thank you, Professor Rada and Ms. Marima for giving us a speech. Actually, right now I'm working on a thesis about a film about the massacre in Srebrenica in 1995, and the film is called Where Are You Going, Ida? Yes. Yeah. I actually have two questions, actually, because the film was directed by a female director, and I think at the end of the film, I think the message from the director is about reconciliation between the Serbs and the Bosnians. But for me, I'm a pessimist, so even I understand such a concept, and I believe that's the worst thing to do, and that's my idea, of course. But based on the news I've seen in Taiwan, I mean, the one I know was in 2015 when the president of Serbia, Vučić, excuse me for my poor pronunciation.
Excellent
Yes.
pronunciation.
Thank you. I think when he was there to attend, he was being mocked, and he was being thrown stones by Bosnians. So I wonder if reconciliation can truly happen. Yeah. So that would be our first question. And my second question will be, because of the war in the 90s, so Yugoslavia became 5 countries: Croatia, Slovenia, Bosnia, and Macedonia, Serbia. And there's actually a video that I found a few years ago on YouTube. The title of the video is a bit extreme. It's called Who the F is Tito? Yeah, Who the F is Tito? And in that video, several people were interviewed and asked about their life during Joseph Tito. And one elder lady said that she believed that being united is much better than being separated, and she's kind of Yugo-nostalgic. So I wonder how many people have that idea, have that thought now in all 7 countries now. Yeah, that will be my questions. Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Ms. Marima.
Okay, let's continue with the next question. I think you just take your notes.
Yeah, sure.
All right, as, they might be overlapping, and I want to collect more questions than possible. Okay, if that's possible. Okay, go ahead, Roma.
It's okay.
Hi, thank you, Professor Rada, Professor Chu, and Marima, and also to everyone. My question is more related to the what constitutes war, because traditionally we understood in terms of the involvement of armed conflict, but now our society has become a much more sophisticated with the whole the inventions of digital technology and digitalization. So in that context, war today we don't need like a full-fledged conflict to impose one views or on other. For instance, if we see in what is happening in China, particularly in the context of the Uyghur people, the very existence of the massive mass surveillance and how this kind of like the surveillance not only in terms of just the CCTV camera, but very sophisticated that trace your that collect your DNA and that collect your facial recognitions. So in that context, you don't really need a like full-fledged conflict in the traditional context. So how do you relate that to the whole understanding of future, imagination that you today you discuss about? And another question is maybe more general. Maybe when we discuss about the world, there's often this things come about. World would be in much better place if we have more of women in leader. So when we have this kind of the statements of discussion, it is often talks maybe from the perspective of the physiological differences. So I'm just curious because in the last few years of my understanding, we have a few leaders. Sometimes women leaders. Sometimes they are as much as cunning as men. So just two short questions. Thank you.
Any other question here?
Oh no.
No? Any question online? If not now, let me see. In addition to Marima and Drew's comment, I think we have questions about whether reconciliation is really possible, because everyone still lives in their histories, and one side or the other. Okay. And whether erasing the past can help people to face their present time, and whether still there are different ways to name the enemies, as Chu said, counter-revolution. So this is like what Doma was saying, different forms of wars are still going on in our society, naming the enemy in different names, but also like what China is doing against this Uyghur and other people, Tibetan too. Okay, it's different forms of forced assimilation, or people would say cultural genocide. They change their ways of thinking, behavior, thoughts, religion entirely. And against this suppressive measure, is there any way to resist? If we think resistance might bring forth violence, but if how do we deal with this reality in our contemporary, very suppressive societies in certain regimes? Can feminists really help to change this very pervasive, actually violent society? And also civility, okay, can be done in a different form of violence. Definitely, right? Civility, like Confucian, rituals. Okay, it's absolutely that. Okay, civilizing barbarians, civilizing and erasing and changing the neighboring tribes, okay, and taking their land. So, how can we maintain our vigorous thinking and observation and also in some way of resistance, but can we really alter that form of cruelty? So I think maybe the three of you can all comment on that, but Rada, you go first.
Thank you all for your questions, and thank you, Joyce. I think what you said just now, these few sentences, you actually resumed the questions and the dilemmas we all have, and you did it very well. Thank you. I mean, it's very clear to me now. I'm not sure I can answer all the questions. I can just thank you all. Thank you, Merima, for your talk and your personal view. And I must say that I think we all learn a lot from experience. This is one thing. We all learn a lot from, not only from books and from our studies about politics. I learned as much from everyday politics and from what is happening in all those countries. In the country I live in, now it has been France for almost 35 years, and the country, or the countries I come from. So the experience of trauma that is brought to you from your direct or indirect experience brings you somehow a lot of knowledge. I don't know how, but there is some fermentation there that happens with time also, you see. This is one thing. Another thing is, maybe I should start from this reconciliation dilemma that we all have. Thank you for your question, you see, and thank you for resuming it, Joyce. I am also very pessimistic, because we are in a time when I don't see much reason for, much support for optimism. But I think that anything like reconciliation, like process, anything like reconciliation, any attempt is a process. And if it is a process, it means that it must involve time. It must involve cooperating with others. It must involve inclusivity. It must involve listening to others. And this is where the hope comes from. It doesn't come from the events where that we saw, or events of aggressivity and violence. It comes from resistance to violence and from attempts to cooperate, from sociability, from being with others, sharing with others. Sharing is very difficult in times of war problems and times of scarcity also, I must say. In times of poverty and in times of war, it is very difficult to expect sharing. But still, we must work on it and we must hope for it. Now, I will go back to what Merima mentioned about women in black. Women in black in Yugoslavia, and by the way, women in black are an international thing. There are women in black in many countries. There have been women in black in Ireland. Remember the time of violence in Ireland, the times in plural of violence in Ireland, and so on. Women in black are the best political option in Yugoslav countries. Women in black and other women's organizations in Yugoslav countries. When you see all the political options that exist there, the only people who are cooperative, who go to the others, who speak to the others, who try to understand their trauma, which is different from another trauma, who work with others on their trauma and try to understand it. It is women. They do this, and they have been doing this also during the war. They cross borders, which men couldn't, because men would be arrested by armies. They would be prevented. They would be recruited by different armies. But women could pass at their risk, because it was also risky and difficult. They could do this, so they have an experience of doing it. And but they are not perceived at all in public as political. They are not perceived as serious. They don't. It is difficult for them to access the public space, and yet they are active in the public space. It is difficult because why? Because the public space is occupied by belligerent men and belligerent women. So this much about a reconciliation. Whether feminists can do something about it the way Joyce put the same question. Yes, I think they are doing a lot about it. And yet it's a long way. Let's see. It's a long way, but they are working on education also. This is very important. It has to pass through education with younger generations and so on. And this is where they are active without structured support from states. They don't get support from states. This is very difficult. Whether erasing the past helps? No, not at all. Erasing the past doesn't help, but forgetting about some interpretations of the past may help to some extent, because there are those interpretations of the past that are very inciting, very much inciting violence, right? So there again, you have to be careful. You don't have ready-made answers. Imagination, that is, Roma put the question of imagination, and that is of course a difficult question, and I'm not sure that women leaders would help at all. I don't think so, because as we all saw, they are very much the same like men, but a different leadership. Yes, if men would develop this different leadership, a different way of doing politics, yes. Not bringing women into politics as it is. It wouldn't help much, although it would help to some extent, maybe. Yeah. And then with my dear friend Chu, it's an endless endless questions. We could never finish this. I'm not messianic. I'm not preaching redemption. I'm not for Fukuyama or Dugin or anything like that. I am aware of, and I mentioned the difficulties of language and of interpreting what we are talking about and the events that happen. And I think that you are saying pretty much the same thing, but in other words, you see. in many of the examples you gave. Of course, other things happened elsewhere, of course. For example, the states, the national states in Latin America. This is colonial history. But the Latin American national states were born very early, earlier than many nation states in Europe. So you would say this comes from elsewhere. It's another modernity, but it belongs in a wider circle of the same modernity, because through colonialism, of course, but then they diverted that history, modern history of colonialism. And Latin American states were liberating national states, were liberating themselves from what? From the Spanish crown, from the Portuguese crown, but they built the nation on the condition of the exclusion of the indigenous people. So who were these people who were building the national states in Latin America? They were the Creoles, which means the whites who conquered Latin America, and then they married the indigenous women. They were the so-called Creoles, and they wanted to get their own independence, and they got it. So everything is ambiguous, and in every circle of history you get history diverted on another model, right? And this is how we go ahead. We cannot go ahead in a straight line. We may prefer it, but it doesn't happen. We would love to. Now, this is what Balibar says. He says, you were right to remind us of his book on civility. He has several. He says that you can't eliminate violence, but he says you can civilize. You can try and civilize violence. This is civilized violence. So let's not be too ambitious. Let's not think that we can eradicate. But let's at least civilize. Then we can debate of the degrees of civilizing violence, because my first reaction would be that this is not enough. Right? But what can you say? This is the first step at least. About Yugoslavia, it's difficult to say, you see. Yugoslavia is definitely a failure. All these examples that we have given are a failure. And to my feeling, capitalism, especially in its newest and latest, I don't know how to call them, neoliberal, post-neoliberal reforms, is also a failure in a way, considering what was aimed, the progress that was aimed. But from every failure, you can learn something. I was not brought up to think that Yugoslavia was a failure. This is something that I must. It's a bitter evidence, right, that it has been a failure. From failure, we can learn a lot, and from failures, we can learn politics. And this is where we can be pessimists and still think that by learning from something, we can work on some collaboration with others. I think our future is only in collaboration and in working together, you see, in sharing. Otherwise, there is no future. And this is the hope. So for the future, we have a hope, even although there are cases of constitutive violence, as you said rightly, true. Constitutive violence, but constitutive of what? Of the nation. The nation itself is a catastrophe. You see, the nation and the national state itself is a failure. So, what about revolution? Revolution, you see, my friends who still swear by the revolution, I was raised not swearing by the revolution. I don't swear by the revolution anymore. But my friends who still swear by the revolution will say, well, when I ask them, what about violence in the revolution? There is blood. They said, well, it's inevitable. You must have some violence in the revolution. And then I would say, I'd prefer not to have violence. Then let's not have revolution. Let's be patient. Let's construct, or let's have a different revolution. Construct it peacefully, avoiding violence, but cooperating with those we don't agree with, which is very, very difficult. I think I must stop here because I too can continue for another round.
Maybe I think it's about time for the assistant to go home now. And Melima, you have had some quick, yeah, please, I think you should. And Bruno, you can not do it.
I think an important question you need to address.
Yes, of course, the question of the film and reconciliation, of course. So thank you very much for mentioning that film, and I feel really proud on you and on, of course, on my country, most famous woman director, Jasmila Žbanić, and her movie is really amazing, and it addresses in the most human and particular way the story of the genocide in Srebrenica. I think right now, before that I say something on the film and further to connect with the idea of reconciliation, I must say that basically we didn't learn anything on wars in basis of any experience, not just after the genocide in Srebrenica, but you had in the 20th centuries you had the biggest genocide during the World War II, and after that in the 90s you had you have genocide in Rwanda, 1994. Then you have genocide in Europe, Africa, of course Europe in Srebrenica, 1995. And do not forget 10 years ago, and still unresolved, the question of Rohingyas genocide. And today, Palestine, it's so obvious. So in basically 30 years, we had and still have and still happening around us, the 4 or maybe more genocide that we don't even can address. So that's one thing. Other thing, yes, you noticed really good that Jasmila ended and concluded her film with the story with the potential open end and a story of reconciliation, but I'm too skeptical because I was living until the October of last year in Bosnia. I was doing my research in that circumstances, in that kind of political ambient, in that kind of pressure, because that idea of reconciliation, it's too utopical. Yes, it was really a nice idea to finish the film, and I'm not sure that basically it's working or that it will be working. Of course, it's a long process, as Rada stated, but you see the political situation in all ex-Yugoslav countries, you mentioned 7, which is really good. It's really difficult situation politically.
May I interrupt you a second? Is it a necessary, maybe it's a necessary aesthetic version?
Yeah, solution, aesthetic solution.
Necessary
yes.
Aesthetically.
Yes, aesthetically it's really necessary, especially in the terms of arts. Yeah, we want to we want to feel something. Art is there to move us emotionally, ethically, to provoke our answers. So that's right. That it's good answer for movie or for the book. But it's not, it's in real life, it is functioning really, really different. Because Professor Chu mentioned that idea of brotherhood and unity. Where are the sisters? But the sisters showed during the Second World War, of course, that they were also included in different aspects in the wars, especially in the war of dissolution of Yugoslavia. But to be, maybe I will oversimplify. I have one idea, and I discussed it one time with Professor Chu on that. So during all history, for example, in ancient Greek literature, you have idea, okay, this war started because of the woman. First World War started with the, in Sarajevo, actually in my hometown, because one guy killed another political representative. Second World War started because of the invasion of the during one night invasion on Germany, on Poland. So, and what is that trigger for Yugoslavian war? Tito. Tito was a world recognized political figure. He has power to connect all ethnical groups together. But in the moment that he died, at the beginning of 80s, in the 19th century, that started a mess because other political figures, male figures, were intending to have that kind of power, but no one could. So, and the idea was to create ethnical conflicts between the people. So, and what is most important for the question of reconciliation right now, because those ethnic politicians and those ethnic elites are still ruling those countries in ex-Yugoslavia. So we facing that problem, and that's why the freedom of speech is really in a bad position. Intellectuals who are thinking, writing other narratives that are not that are in not good terms with official discourses are really in bad position. And people, it's really poor, stressed, and dealing with their own traumas, of course. So basically, reconciliation in this moment, it's pretty much utopical, and I think sadly impossible. So, and as we see in all world, it's going really, really in the wrong direction. So I will conclude with that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think those are really very difficult and unsolvable problems. It's human. But maybe let me go back to what Rada mentioned about totality. That is with infinite particulars, infinite components that keep changing. So what requires of us is not to resign or to give up resistance, but to resist through thinking, through art, through intellectual work, and through education. Because we cannot really accept this civilizing process, assimilating the whole into one unity. Okay, but we don't want this acting out of violence either, right? Acting out of violence will not give us time for any remedy. So we need revolution in thought. We need resistance and violate the given rule. Okay, without that force, nothing will be changed. That will repeat, right, again and again. So we really need violent thought in art, in film, in intellectual work, so that something might change into and may bring into this totality, right, as a whole. So let's keep thinking. I mean, this is just an endless task for us. That's why we're here, right? And we don't really need to conclude, right? Because this is an ongoing process. Okay, thank you so much. We'll stop here. Thank you. Yeah, let's give